It's alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to Alive After Reading. I'm your host, Tim Niederreiter, and we are back from hiatus. And with me today is a guest who is I met while we were on hiatus. I met him at Balticon, which was a great trip. I really enjoyed my con season this year, which was basically about a month, but only 2 conventions, and they were amazing. But both Balticon and 4th Street Fantasy. But welcome to the show, Paul Ellis, Paul K Ellis. Welcome.
Well, thanks for having me. And it's going to be a pleasure being here. I know just from the conversations we had at Balticon.
Well, yeah, I had a feeling you'd be good on this show when we finally chatted there. I mean, there's a lot of people I've met who on this show who I've had on the show who I was a fan of their work on previous podcasts. And I got to say, when you've appeared on the Roundtable podcast or the Archivos Podcast Network, I guess, whatever it is now, those are always fun to listen to as well. So
those are nerve-wracking. They absolutely are. Because some of the people that Dave pulls in to pull apart, it really is nerve-wracking. I don't know.
Well, you've been on all sides of that one, yeah.
Oh yeah. I've been on. Yes, I have. I've been both the Rack War and the Racky. That sounds horrible, but yes, that's what I've done both of those.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that would be my choice of words because I've only been the guest writer on those shows. Mm-hmm. I've never been a guest host or the guest or the other guest host, basically. Anyway, it brings back fond memories just thinking about that show, though, because that's kind of how I got into the podcasting sphere. I was like, this is how good podcasts can be when you just talk about stuff. It's awesome.
It really that stream of consciousness and the way that it was able to drive a lot of creative thought. And I think that's why we've got podcasts like yours, like Dead Robot Society, almost anything that Mur Lafferty puts her fingers on. It's because that conversation drives a whole lot of creative impetus, even if you're just listening to it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I guess I never really wanted to podcast as much as after I started listening to Roundtable Podcast, back when it was still called that. Yeah. Anyway, but I do digress because I should ask you to introduce yourself as we traditionally do. This show's already gotten weird. Right. So what sort of stuff do you write and other creative stuff you do?
I'm Paul K. Ellis. I have been writing predominantly, I hate to say urban fantasy because that drives this kind of a romance type of genre when you say that. But I kind of liken it to what happens when urban fantasy meets noir, and that's the playground that I'm playing in at the moment. I did have a steampunk and a hard science fiction work that got put on hold because, I don't know how much further you want me to go into this, but
okay, feel free.
Yeah. Well, I was actually listening to a Balticon version of Dead Robots, and they had Charlie C.D. Brown on, and I know that he's been on yours as well, and he was pitching an anthology, and I said, well, okay, I'll cold call that, and I'll go put a story into that. So I did, and I got accepted, and I was really excited about that. And then when I was talking to Charlie later, he goes, yeah, when I looked at it, my wife's name is Paula Ellis, and I said to myself, why is my wife sending me a story? And so I think he teases me, you only got accepted because you sound like my wife. Your name sounds like my wife's. So, but that was for Dirty Magic Los Angeles, and so I started writing that, and I wrote a short story that was in that, and it's about a Cajun detective in the late 50s who's wound up after post-World War II in Los Angeles. So it was a lot of fun. He runs afoul of a bunch of Celtic gods. That storyline I was able to drive into the second anthology, Dirty Magic New Orleans. So Charlie says, write me a novella about this guy. And I said, all right, I can write you a novella about this guy. And then I didn't. Life happened. And I had a podcast and I've been writing fairly regularly short stories and some novella works, and that all stopped for about 18 months.
That's a long while.
Just dead. Well, I'm a father of 3 girls. 2 of them were in college. I got another one coming up, ready to go to college, and so life when it happens really. It's really intense. So I'm now getting back in. I'm dusting all the taking all the mothballs off of the websites and getting my writing back up. And when I met Charlie at Baltagon this year, and when he purchased his literary work, he wrote into the cover of it, says, "Ellis, where's my novella?"
Well, that's a good place to be, though, right?
Yeah. I mean, so I'm working on that, and I'm about 15,000 words into the novella. And in the midst of this, my youngest child came up to me, and she had been watching Underworld. And youngest, she's 17. She had been watching Underworld and Resident Evil with her sister, and she came in and she says, "Dad, if there was ever a zombie apocalypse, would vampires fight with the humans to save their food source or not?" And then turned around and walked out. So now I had that squatting in my creative space, demanding a lot of attention. And in parallel with writing some of the Dirty Magic art, my character, Jacques Dupree, in writing some of that work, I've now been doing some background work on this story that's going to be the Human Vampire Alliance against zombies. I don't think we've done anything like that yet, and not really my genre, but this idea has just sat down and sucked up a lot of creative juices.
I know how that goes. Too many ideas. That's a pretty common writer complaint, if it's a complaint. But it sounds like you're working on some interesting stuff. It's good to finally be back, I assume.
Yeah, I didn't realize this, but it's a lot like if you've ever been, because I did karate for years with the girls, and then I stopped doing karate, and I was like, why am I so anxious all the time? Why am I so short-tempered? And it's because I wasn't doing what my body was expecting me to be doing. So I started working out again. And this 18 months has been very difficult for me because it's the same thing. Why am I so irritable all the time? Why is everything making me crazy? Because my brain wasn't getting its stretch in writing like it had normally been getting. So yeah, I'm a lot calmer dude now.
No, it's good. I'm a chiller Paul.
Yeah, I like that.
So as for your as for urban fantasy, you did say I think you conflated a little with paranormal romance, not to criticize, but like there are 2 separate genres there, and it sounds like you're definitely more in the urban fantasy camp.
Yeah, I did, and that may be deliberate. But my introduction into this was Anne Rice, and that's definitely a lot of romance into that. That and I can't remember the writer's name now to save my life, and I read a lot of her stuff. It's the
Laurel K. Hamilton.
Yes, that's it. Thank you very much. And it's from a mythology standpoint, and that's where I come from. I did a study of the history of myth and how it all started and all of that. I really do key in on people's modern takes of ancient mythology, and I really like the way that she was utilizing a lot of that. But the romance kept getting, because I didn't care about it.
Kept getting in the way.
Yeah, I was not her target audience, so I kind of dropped that. The idea that a lot of writers are doing now, it's almost grimdark urban fantasy, and I'm not necessarily certain I want to go just that dark on it, but it is grittier, and I want to give it the flavor of classic noir. That a girl with a past meets a guy with no future.
Yeah. Lots of good lines, lots of good pulp stories to draw from there.
Yeah, that I want that lineage. I don't want to just do a pastiche. I don't want to do an homage. I do want to draw from those roots to tell a new story. But I was kind of shying away from the whole romance side of it, and then it suddenly dawned on me: in the war, one of the 3 main drives in the war is the failed romance. It's that romance that is doomed to failure from the beginning and gets pursued anyway. So that's taken some. I've had to rethink a couple of things.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of experience with noir film, but I always remember it was one of my favorite films though is Double Indemnity.
Oh yes,
Yeah, and that one is so terrific,
now
and it's got that element in spades.
that's Barbara Stanwyck and Fred McMurray from My Three Sons, right? That were in Double Indemnity. He's the insurance guy.
Yeah, the insurance guy.
Yeah. And again, it's that classic, and it's fast. That the study of that is fascinating because the Hays Code said that you couldn't show certain things on screen. You couldn't even allude to certain things on screen, and the convolutions that the writers did to get the points across without actually coming out and saying things are just breathtaking. It led to some really good writing.
Yeah, absolutely. Those restrictions may have worked out well for that movie at the very least. I don't know about other ones because I haven't seen many. But for that, yeah.
Have you seen The Maltese Falcon?
No. See, I keep meaning to.
Yeah, The Maltese Falcon, The Big Sleep, and Casablanca, although I know that there are people that will throw down and fight me and tell me that Casablanca is not noir, and I'm telling you straight up and down, it's shot that way, with the way the script was written and the way the characters are. But those three, if you've only seen a couple or you're just getting into the genre, those three are breathtakingly entertaining.
All right, I have seen Casablanca. And I love that one as well. It's just that I don't watch movies very much, and I that's one of my common themes I'll come back to on this show. Though it is interesting because I think one of the reasons I stopped watching movies is I've been suffering from chronic fatigue for a long time, pretty much the whole time I've been doing this podcast, and I didn't even really know it until a few weeks ago. And I thought, okay, maybe I should try this. Well, actually, a year ago, I said I need to try to get more energy to write more. But I think I'm gonna have more energy for everything now that I have a machine to help me sleep. It's kind of weird. But anyway, that's enough about me. But it's one of those things like there's movies I want to watch. I just don't have any interest in anything. That was the issue I was having for such a long time, and it did carry over to the writing. And this kind of stories I would tell, like I'm like, I need to get books out. I can start writing novellas instead of novels. It's like that. There just wasn't as much time. Wasn't as much power left.
It's those things that we tell ourselves. So that we won't do the things that we know we should be doing. Yeah, and I get that. I'm a movie junkie, and I will tell you right now, I'm the worst of the movie junkies because I'll start watching a movie, and if it hasn't captured my attention in the first 15 minutes, I'll turn it off. Drives my kids crazy. I have a 3-episode rule for new television shows. I will watch the first 3 episodes. If it hasn't captured my attention in the first 3 episodes, some of them don't even make it to 3. I know I'll watch the first episode and go, oh, that's good. I'm not going to watch any more of that one. But I'll watch 3 episodes, and if it's captured my attention, I'll go ahead and watch the rest of it. Now, there's been a couple of those over the years that I have not followed, that I haven't really followed that rule with. And one of them was True Blood. I watched the first couple of episodes. I'm like, I don't care about that. And then a couple of years later, I was telling somebody, I couldn't get into it. And they said, watch it now. Watch it. Did
it work out?
Yeah, and it did. It did. I really enjoyed the series. But for some reason, where I was at the time that it started, I was like, I've got better things to do with my time. I'm not going to watch the rest.
Oh, yeah.
And and the thing is, we've got so many choices now. When Star Trek The Next Generation first came out, if you had watched the first 3 episodes of that, you would never have watched it again.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because the first season was horrible. Now,
I remember I've seen that whole show. Yeah, it gets a lot better. There's a few gems in the first season, but most of it mostly kind of low quality.
But so it was good that we didn't have the choices then.
Yeah, we're giving them more of a chance, right? And actually, there are a couple of shows like that these days that have done similar things, like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. mostly did it that way too. The first season's kind of forgettable, and then it gets really solid, at least in my book.
Well, I haven't seen the latest season yet. That's on the DVR for me to watch some other time when I've got the time to do it.
Oh, I'm way behind on that show, but I've seen like 4 seasons of it. I really love them, and I mean to get to the next one. I basically watch them as they come out on Netflix now, though. I can't watch live TV, TV airing every week. That's just not me anymore. Can't do it.
It's very hard to do. I don't know how my girls. Well, the thing is, they're in school, so during the summer they got the time. They'll binge everything.
Yeah.
But when school starts, the DVR fills up because there's nothing they don't have the time for, and that's kind of the way that I was with it as well. I'm not really sure what this has to do with my writing process, other than my eclectic love of practically everything media related. But
let's take it back a bit then. Because actually, you say you give I thought of this when you were saying you give an episode, give a show 3 episodes or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I discovered recently. I mean, I could give a book a page because I have literary training. I have all sorts of opinions about what makes a good book and what makes a good sentence, for that matter. And it doesn't take long for me to get sick of a book. I've put down dozens of books in the past couple of years without reading more than a few pages.
I'm going to confess to having done that as well. I read the first Dune novel and really loved it. I picked up the second Dune novel, and
it just gets harder from there, though. I got to tell you.
I couldn't do it. I couldn't get through the second one.
Which is funny because it's so much shorter. It's like 100 pages long.
Well, I picked it up. I read through the first chapter, and I didn't care. I just didn't care to finish it. And I've got Audible, and I listen to a lot of my books now, in addition to reading because of my commute. So I'm listening to some of these books, and I'm like, no.
That's kind of an expensive habit if you're just saying no to the books after 5 minutes or whatever.
Well, they do let you have a 5-minute preview. So when I'm going to pick the books, I'll listen to it, and the book is fantastic, and it's got great reviews, but the narrator is totally miscast. Now, my background is in radio and television and doing a lot of voice work. So when I hear a lot of, I call it mouth noise, the sibilance, the taking a breath, when you're standing right in front of the mic, that type of thing. When I hear that in recording, I don't care to listen to the rest of it. I get so distracted by the mouth noises that I can't hear the words. And there was one recently, and I'm not going to give out any title names because I don't want to offend anyone, where I had to return the Audible book. I purchased the book. I didn't listen to the preview. I purchased it. I tried to listen to it. I couldn't. I returned the book and bought the Kindle version and read it, and really enjoyed it. I just could not listen to the Audible.
Yeah, audiobooks are really hit and miss for me. I mean, there's some of them I can really enjoy. Some of them are as much a work of art as a book that they're based on, right? They're even more so because there's somebody else layering their art on top. But then there's so many I just like, this is detracting from my enjoyment of the story. But I did actually have a point with I've had experienced a change recently as regards putting books down after just thinking this guy can't write. It's kind of how I feel about a lot of them. And I think that's just kind of, I think it's been a problem for me. I don't know if it's a problem for you. This is different. This is probably personal. But for me, it's like if I put a book down just because I thought it was bad, and I have very high standards, I'm so critical of books, maybe that's not the best way to be going about reading and enjoying it, because I used to really enjoy reading. And lately I've had a lot more trouble with that. So I said, okay, I'm going to give this book that I already know I don't like another chance. Like, I didn't like the writing style, but I'm going to give it another chance. And I'm now 30% of the way through it, which is it's a long book, so this makes sense. I'm not going to say the name because I said I didn't like the book. I still don't really like it. And it's not like I'm reading it to read it. It's not painful. It's just kind of whatever, meh, writing style-wise is the main issue.
Well, and a lot of these styles depend on when they were written. If you go read the original Dracula or the original Frankenstein, and you try to read that using today's standards, because the Dracula was written in almost a travelogue style. It was journal entry.
Yeah, and Frankenstein's epistolary.
Exactly. And for modern readers, that is horrible and I know this because my girls were like, I want to read this. I'm like, okay, I'm going to tell you right now, reset your expectations. Take different style of writing. And one of them got through it and said, yeah, the movies are better. I'm like, no, don't tell me that. The other one was, I can't even, Dad, I'm sorry, I can't get through it. That's fine. I understand. It's written differently. It's a different style of writing. And I think that appeals, or that carries over to today's writing style. I do I've been very critical of my writing and tried very much to model my style after less is more. That type
Mm-hmm.
of approach to it, instead of these overblown sentences and these rambling discourses, and really editing down for just the nugget in the middle. I'm not always successful with that. Sometimes I get, consumed with my own cleverness. But I really do want to give that style of writing that is very, very easy to read and reads very rapidly. I think that in building tension, in particularly a noir type story, a detective story, you can have the ebb and flow and tension by the way that you change just your sentence lengths. And so, without getting too geeky about those are things that I like to try to do consistently, and I'm not really consistent with it yet, but I do like to try with that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I try. I don't know exactly what my goal is. I mean, my goal varies depending on what book I'm writing, because I do write in a couple of different genres and styles. I guess, but it all kind of ends up being my, just my style. But it's been a while since I've analyzed what that actually ends up looking like. It seems like people are enjoying it lately. The most recent works do pretty well with reviewers. But
you gotta love that.
yeah, it's enjoyable. I don't get a lot of reviews. I don't have a lot of eyes on those books, but the people who read them seem to like them.
Well, that's the start. That's your core audience right there. They're the people that you want to read to write for, I suppose.
I suppose you're right, and I guess, but mostly I think the reason I got better was I learned how to characterize better. It took me forever to do that. I wrote for 12 years pretty seriously before I got really even okay at characterizing people. I think maybe just 10 years. I could give myself some more credit, but this is a fairly long time for me. I mean, I don't know. I mean, out of my life, it's about a third of it. At this point,
right?
And that's so it feels like a long time at that, and I just gotta say that's one of those things. And now I'm like, why would you ever make that decision? It's kind of obvious what's a bad decision when you look back at some of these things I did in the past, or that other people do now. Other writers that I'm not as fond of, perhaps.
Well, a lot of it's just experience, though. I mean,
it is definitely.
You don't know it's a bad decision until you make it and look back and go, "Ooh, that was a bad decision."
And yeah.
I wish we could learn a different way.
Yeah, learn from the future back. So you just like, yeah, I know the right way to do it, and now I know that other way's wrong. I did it right, now I know the other way's wrong.
You don't have to fear what you're going to do because you know it's going to work. Wouldn't that be great?
That's like a totally different ontology. It's completely different. How is that even? I mean, it's a different universe, is what you're describing there.
Well, it's pretty much non-linear time. It's never going to work for us. No.
Yeah. Not that we would be able to conceive of anyway. Yeah. So anyway, back to your work. We do ramble quite a bit. This show is going to be perhaps a little more rambly than most because it is the first episode back, and so my apologies.
No, that's fine. As you can tell, I work best that way. It's kind of all over the road.
Yeah. So as for your urban fantasy, you say you're mostly focusing on this novella. Did you have any other urban fantasy projects in the pipe besides the short stories?
No, I kind of that whole episode of doing things with C.D. Brown, with Charlie Brown, came about by accident. It was a whim. I had been writing. I've been writing for myself for years. Most of that stuff is never going to see the light of day. Ever. It's pretty horrible. But for some reason, not for some reason, when I was much younger, my father did a lot of travel work for the old Reynolds Metals Company, and one of them was a plant in Lake Charles, Louisiana. And my father went down there, and he's kind of a amateur gourmand, and he went in and would go to these little places. Because he says, where's a good place to eat? And they said, well, look for pretty much any shack by the road, and you get some of the best Cajun food around here. And he thought they were kidding. And he pulled into this gas station that was no longer a gas station. It had been converted into a diner. And he went in and sat down. They put newspaper on the table. He watched the Piro come in off of the bayou with a with the crawfish fresh caught in there, and they boiled it and dumped it on the table in front of him, and he said some of the best food he ever ate. So he brought that Cajun cuisine to the house, and we loved it, and we loved it to death, and that started my lifelong fascination with the Cajun people, the Cajun culture, and I have never been to Louisiana, outside of New Orleans. I've never been. So, and New Orleans is its own special little city beyond anything else that goes on in the state. So I had to do a lot of research there. For a time, I was trying to learn some French phrases and how to pronounce them correctly because I was operating under the thought that if I could think in French, I would be more Cajun. You kind of see where I go all over the place with this stuff. So
no, I see, but it makes sense. You want to immerse yourself in the kind of the feel, so you can actually write there. Yeah. I don't write in settings in the real world very much, so that's I'm not that familiar with doing that. But I get in there with my science fiction and fantasy settings, and from time to time, that's for sure.
And I think that was the driver, is that I wanted it to be authentic. I didn't want it to be stereotypical. So after doing all of this research and had been doing it for 8 or 10 years at the time this came up, and in my background in history and the study of myth, one of the either underrepresented or misrepresented characters or mythology pantheons is the Celtic pantheon. Mm. So I thought, hey, I'll just do that, and we'll go to New Orleans, we'll hit the Celtic pantheon, or go to Los Angeles, and we'll have this vet from World War II who's and that's the typical thing for any noir film set in Los Angeles in the 40s and 50s is the guy is a World War II vet. He can't, we would call it PTSD today. He can't acclimate back to civilian life. He doesn't do well in the police department. He doesn't play well with others, so he winds up being a private detective. I took that trope and put it on its ear to make it, to have this normal, everyday Joe have a run-in with Celtic gods and not know how to get out of it. So that was Dirty Magic Los Angeles. And New Orleans is that he does such a bad job that he gets kicked out of LA and actually has to come back home to New Orleans, where he said he'd never return. And there's reasons behind that. If you want to know, you can get Dirty Magic Los Angeles and Dirty Magic New Orleans at Amazon. Charlie
under Charlie Brown, or is it CD Brown?
It's Charlie Brown. He edited those under that name, but he found that Charlie Brown is ungoogleable. You can't find him.
Absolutely. I had the opposite problem with Google. My name is kind of unique and the last name is hard to spell. So there you go.
So, but yeah, that's how that character came about, and it's the only one that I had. I had been writing almost exclusively steampunk and hard science fiction. I had 2 different universes that I had together, and I had not been doing any urban fantasy at all. And it's funny that the stuff that is really published well has been the urban fantasy, and it's the thing that I would have told you I don't do.
Isn't that just how it works, though? Right? You know, like, I don't know. Like with Paul Cooley and his various works. You know, some of these that came out, and some of the works that hit it big were the works he never like The Black. With him. He's like, I can't write a monster book. I'm not that interested in writing a monster book. And then he wrote a monster book, and it was huge for him anyway.
Yeah, it went great. And see, when I came in with Cooley, he was writing his Lamashtu and the series of all of the Mesopotamian gods.
Yeah, Garaga.
The Garaga series. So I was fascinated by that. I'm like, oh, somebody that writes stuff that I like to read. And he's like, I love writing it, but it's such a small audience. I'm like, I know, it's horrible. The audience is so small, because I really do enjoy the stuff that he writes that way. So, but the Black, he's got the same, his characters transcend the novels. And even though they've got different names, they have that same internal vibe. You know, when you meet someone that you know that you've met before, but you haven't, that feeling of deja vu because they're just alike. His characters in those books transcend genres. So I really enjoy spending time with them, no matter who they are, because his writing makes them real. And that's what I want to do. I want to make my characters real so that there's something about everybody there that people can relate to. I like him because I know who he is. That guy's a jerk. I don't like him at all. And you know, whoever they're pointing to in the book novel, that comes through in my characterizations of them. And that's, I think, going to be a lifelong learning lesson there.
Yeah, no kidding. Like I said, characterization was one of my big difficulties. Still is pretty difficult for me to do reliably. It takes a lot of editing to get it right sometimes. But anyway, we are running low on time though, so there is one last segment of the show, and before we do the plugs, which we already kind of jumped the gun on that, but but what if you've been reading anything lately? What sort of stuff have you been? What can you recommend a book? Basically, anything you can recommend to the listeners here.
Well, on Audible they had C.J. Cherry's The Faded Sun trilogy on special for $3.95. So I bought it, and that's what I've been listening to. I've actually been reading a lot of research for the Vampire Zombie Human novel. So a lot of that has been the vampire mythology, and I'm not going to bore you because they're fairly academic and a little dry. But what I've been listening to for pleasure is Faded Sun series, and if you haven't read that series, I highly recommend that.
Well, nice. As for me, I can't recommend the book I'm reading now, so we're not going to name that one. But on the ride back from Balticon, I have this book that I've been recommending to everybody. That I would listen to 10 hours of it in the car, and then the last 2, or maybe 11 hours, and then the last hour I'd read. I did get the Kindle book and read because it wasn't my audiobook.
Oh my goodness!
So, and I was waiting in the bus station. I finished this book in like 20 minutes. What would probably take an hour to read out loud. It's called Dark Matter by Blake Crouch, and I was really surprised by how much I enjoyed it. It's a modern thriller with some science fiction elements. And the less you know about it, the better probably going into it. Basically, what I was told before I started listening to it was this book's about a guy who wakes up, like he gets basically there's something happens to this guy, and then he wakes up and he's in a different version of his own life. And he's done everything that he ever wanted to in this new life. Basically, he's achieved this huge scientific status in that community, and that's all there is to it. And then it just goes crazy from there. It's a nutty book. Lots of great characters, just great characters. Not a lot of characters, but great characters. So it's very on topic today, and I could go on about it, but I don't want to because spoiling that book would be a disaster for people. That one's well worth reading for all the surprises too.
Great.
Anyway, thanks for being on the show, Paul. Where can people find your stuff online?
You can find me at www.wirelessadventures.com. Out there on that site is the first short story that has been serialized in podcast form, 3 episodes. So you can go out there and listen to it for free. If you like it, you can buy the second. And the 4th story in the series is going to be released in the Paradise City anthology to support Scott Kahn later this summer. So
nice.
For Paradise City, that's got the 4th story. The 3rd story I'm working on right now because Charlie said I had to.
So they're going to be out of order, but they'll get done. They'll all be out soon enough.
It is out of order. I did start the work on the 3rd story, and then, like I said, I've been life events had pulled me away from doing it for about 1.5 years. So that it's there. I just need to get it done.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, as for this podcast, you can find more of us at mentalcellarpublications.com. You can find all the podcasts there. That's this podcast and this of Mooks and Monsters, though. Of Mooks and Monsters, the RPG show is off for the summer. They'll be back shortly. We'll be back in September, I believe, with more of those. But yeah, thanks for listening, everybody. And you can find my books at Amazon.com. Go check out the free work I have out there. That's Ilsa in Blue, The Mangrove Suite, and Stormfleet, of course. Those all 3 start different series, so hopefully one will hook you. Thanks for listening, everybody. And goodbye.
That tears it.